All right, we're live. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for a member showcase, which we haven't done one in a while, and it's because I've just been super busy, been having a tough time trying to schedule these in. But I was telling Allison just a little bit ago in the green room, this series, the member showcase series, is so important to me because I feel like a fundamental part of having a community and building a community is making sure you hear the stories of the people that participate in that community. And so we have a whole bunch of these member showcases. I think I have like maybe close to 100 that are already in our archive that I can post a link later that everyone can take a look at. And of course, today, our guest, Alison Sollars, who is from Landmark Health and also works with TPLD, Training a Path to Learning and Development, an organization I totally admire and respect, and also helped sponsor this last week's event, Road to L&D, teachers transitioning to L&D, to instructional design. So let me just turn off one thing here. I'm hearing people log in, so let me shut that down. And we're going to get to asking Alison a series of about 10 questions that I have, maybe more, and we'll learn more about Alison's story and her journey to instructional design. So Alison, even though to me, I've spoken to you quite a few times before, you seem like a veteran L&D professional. It's almost like, I watch sports, and every once in a while you see one of those rookies that come into play sports, and people say that rookie's like a veteran. You seem like that to me. It seems like you've been in this space for a long time. But how long exactly would you say that you've been an instructional designer?
So I got my first job in instructional design last March was when I started. I got the offer in February. So about a year ago, I was looking for a job. And I've been at Landmark Health since around St. Patrick's Day is when I started.
Wow. And so how much of your background in teaching do you think really helped you in your current job?
Oh, a ton. And I also have a couple of years before teaching in an HR operations role where I did direct training and some things like created job aids and stuff that I didn't know were called job aids at the time. But I was like, I can see the link back. But my 10 years teaching in a large district in the United States and my couple years teaching overseas, I was like always the curriculum person. Like I was like the first person you trained that trained the other teachers on the curriculum, or I wrote district level curriculum in some cases. So a lot of the stuff I've done under a different name, like my master's degree that I got not long before transitioning was focused on leadership and operations and gaps, performance analysis, because the main resource schools have in terms of where their budget goes is staff. Staff is where all the money goes. I know we're underpaid, but it's still like they're underfunded because that's still where all the money goes.
Yeah.
So when you look at educational leadership, that's like the big focus is how can you get your teachers to do a better job, and how can you close performance gap with your teachers and your other staff in order to drive student growth and other outcomes that are important to the school improvement plan. So my experience teaching and like what I did and the things that I liked doing, the extras I took on, were, I think, all kind of instructional design related, even though I didn't know what it was. And that was just like where my inclinations were, I guess. Like I was upskilling towards this without realizing I was for many years.
Well, what I sort of feel like, the sense that I get from you, Alison, is that you're a problem solver.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a huge part of what an instructional designer does. And I mean, it even sounds like that getting your master's, it sounds like achieving that was sort of like a way to solve some problems that you were seeing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to get that. I put off getting my master's for a long time because I didn't want a master's in English education, which was like, I guess, what I would have gotten as an English teacher. I was like, but that's not going to be fulfilling to me. Like I like teaching my course, but that's not, I don't have a passion to learn more about that. Like if I do, I'm going to go read some books and like learn the literary history. But that was why I picked educational leadership. It was a long journey to there, and that was why I picked it. I did not pick instructional design or curriculum design because Florida won't pay you for those masters. Otherwise, I might have picked those. But
Interesting. And we haven't even gotten to the questions yet, but I'm really curious about the HR ops thing. So what exactly, how did you land that role, and what did that bring kind of to your to your career as an instructional designer?
Yeah, so I was in marketing and I got laid off and went and taught overseas. I was in marketing really briefly for about a year and a half as a coordinator, doing basically like content writing, copywriting, and working with our franchisees. I worked for a restaurant, working with our franchisees to develop their advertising in local markets, and working with the graphic designer because I'm not really a graphic designer by trade. I can do a little bit of stuff. So I did that. I got laid off. I couldn't find a job. Well, actually, I found several jobs and they all closed down. Like literally, like a publication shut down after I started work there. An agency shut down after I started work there because it was a really rough time in 2009. So I went and taught overseas, and then I wanted to come back home because it just wasn't sustainable to like stay overseas. And I got a job at an event staffing company. Originally, they needed an office manager, but it grew really quickly. And so they put me into this role, which was scheduling an event manager, which was really like an operations manager working with our clients at the venues. And it was basically like people putting on conventions. We were working with them, and I didn't sell our services, but I worked and created the staffing plans and like what they needed for the event and what our employees were expected to do, like what skills they needed, because we did event security. We did like event staffing with like people who could be more interactive, man booths, do different things. Like we did a range of things essentially and had a range of staff. And I hired the security guards and I hired some of the other ones. There was somebody else who hired some of those. And then I also did the onboarding training. I either managed it or I did it myself, depending, because we were a pretty small office. So I did some of both. And I also created all of the event training. So like where things were at the event, who like it just like usually it would come down to like job aids. You didn't like need as fancy e-learning for that, obviously. And this was a long time ago too. But I did like ILTs for the onboarding and then job aids and stuff like that, just as part of that role, managing the staff and managing the events and the performance expectations and making our clients happy. And that obviously ties in a lot, but I didn't know instructional design was a thing. I knew corporate training was a thing, but in my area, HR and corporate training roles actually paid less than teaching back then, even though it was Florida, because my Orlando was so depressed for so many years after the Great Recession. Like we didn't really recover till like 2013, 2014. And by then I was already teaching. So I stayed in that role for a while, hoping it would grow enough that it would be like a good long-term move. And the company did better and better and better, but it still wasn't enough to like really for me to see like growth in the market. I would have had to move to grow. And that's why I went back to teaching and got a teaching job in Orange County Public Schools. So it was kind of like I considered it for a while, but I had never really taught in America, and I still really wanted to do that and had a passion for that. So I wound up going back to doing that.
Wow. So you went from teaching to corporate and then back to teaching.
Yeah.
Wow. That's not typical. I haven't seen a lot of that happen. That's really, really interesting. And so it almost seems like the universe was telling you to be an instructional designer, like with
Yes.
all of these different things that you were doing. It feels like the graduation to where you are now was actually, the perfect kind of evolution. So that's nice. So speaking of what you're doing now, like, so what are things that you're working on right now as an instructional designer?
So I have a lot of projects like at any given time, but the main project I'm working on right now is actually really interesting to me, but very like unsexy work. It's analysis work for the most part. And it is developing a new process for a huge update. So we have a huge update coming up of like, I think 200 or so courses and job aids and pieces in the LMS. Because we're going to switch LMSs and we've had language updates. And so somebody has to audit it and figure out how to organize our updates and sort of prioritize them. And that's what myself and a colleague are doing. And I'm also creating all of the like process documents and processes to make sure, because we're working with multiple teams to make this happen. So it has to be documented. So I've been like elbow deep in documentation at work. I get to do a little bit of like other stuff too, like to get my brain settled, easy stuff. Like, I still do some e-learning development, which to me is the easy, like, okay, I can shut my brain down for a minute and like start to like put things together. And every day has something a little bit different, but that's been the big push there. And then with TPLD, we've been working on designing a program for teachers that we had a big volunteer push to design kind of the rough draft last year. And now we're working on refining it and trying to get our first course out by hopefully this summer, after we go through it and have some SMEs go through it. And so that's been a huge, big level process working with a lot of team members. That's been pretty fun as well, that Sarah and I have been working on.
That's great. That's awesome. I'll definitely have to ask you more about that towards the end. But for your job right now, what is anything in particular that you love that about being an instructional designer? And this question is kind of designed to sort of speak to folks that are interested in getting into this career. Like, what is it that you really like about it?
Yeah, I think so. There's the what do I love about my job is I love that team is my team has grown so much and we've got to establish so much of the processes. So we do get to drive some of the analysis, and it's really like the problem solving and us getting to go in and solve problems is really a focus. And I don't know if that's always true for everybody, but that has been true for us because I have a really great manager, who was my colleague when I first started and got promoted right after I started. So we kind of like have gotten to work together from the beginning. I was one of the first LEDs on our team. And I love kind of that, like, that I was there from the start and kind of saw it all. Like, I got to see a lot of things I think I wouldn't get to see if I'd gone into like a big team and like just been a cog in a wheel, essentially. So that's been a really great thing about my job. But our team is growing, and so there's going to be a lot more LEDs soon. We've grown so much since I've been there, and moved people over and stuff. But in terms of instructional design, what I love about instructional design is that problem solving aspect you mentioned, like that we get to solve a problem and that the solution doesn't look the same every time. I think that might be a mistake sometimes people talk about their organization making. I mean, mine is usually open to, not that I always get my way, but it's usually open to some conversation about what is the best way to solve the problem. And the SMEs and stakeholders I've worked with have all been open to basically like whatever is best for our employees, our learners, our staff, our onboarding, our metric, like whatever's best for what we need to do is what we want to do, and setting kind of ego aside and like solving the problem. And that's what I liked in the school that I worked at not always like at the district level, but at the school level. And usually the teams I worked at the district level was like, it wasn't about us. It was about like solving a specific problem.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. And you could tell you absolutely sort of exude that problem solving mentality. I'm not sure why, just in the way that you answer questions, it always seems to come back around to that. So I really admire that. So you haven't quite been an instructional designer officially for a year, but is there anything at this point now, like that you wish you had known before you even started working as an instructional designer, that you like, if you could go back to yourself, like, last February 2022, and give yourself some advice? Is there anything that you would offer?
It's so hard because this is actually like the first time I made a super intentional career move. So I felt pretty well prepared, but I would say that I wish I had really been more confident in the fact that I knew this, but it didn't feel it in my bones because I had been a teacher for so long, and teachers are both SMEs and like we're learning experts, but we're also subject matter experts, right? So I wish I had known that it is okay not to learn all of the stuff about what you're designing for, right? Like you don't have to. I'm never going to know what a nurse practitioner knows. Like it's just not going to happen because that's not something I'm going to go study in that depth. And I can still design training for nurse practitioners that is really useful and really effective working with my SMEs. And I knew that, but I still kind of you feel this imposter syndrome because you're like, but I'm not the expert. But you're the expert on learning. And I knew this, but I think like, I really wish I had felt it in my bones more at the beginning because it took a while to really like, something logically, but you don't necessarily know it emotionally at first.
Alison, that's really profound, because I think that's the first time that I've heard that. And it seems like that would be a really important piece of advice for new instructional designers. I mean, I'd love to hear feedback from, I see Lita's in here and Kim and Heidi Kirby. If you guys have ever heard that from anybody before, because I think that I wish I could capture that. And well, I am going to capture that. That's what I'll do. I'll clip it and then I'll share it out on the socials so that everyone knows that Alison said it. Let's see. So I wanted to ask you about the skills that you have in e-learning development. Like, what do you do for development?
So my main tool is Storyline at my current job, because that's the tool we probably use the most. Storyline and Rise. I mean, Articulate as a suite, but really Storyline is the one that is most frequently asked for, or our Rises usually have Storyline blocks in them. And then sometimes in Camtasia, which we don't have at my work, but like I'll work on side stuff in Camtasia and Adobe's Creative Suite. So like InDesign, Illustrator, I like to use things to I like to combine things, right? So like, I don't feel comfortable like just making things in one tool. Usually I'm like, sometimes it's a struggle if I don't have the tool I want, but like PowerPoint, you can do your graphic editing in if you don't have access to Adobe or whatever. But I'm very particular. So I'll be like editing a small thing that like probably doesn't matter to everybody, but it bugs me. So I'll take the 10 minutes to throw it into an editing tool before Storyline and do little things like that. So I use a lot more tools than I need probably.
Where'd you get your Storyline chops?
Where did I get my Storyline chops? Mostly e-learning heroes and just like making stuff, honestly, like looking at stuff. And then I did do Tim Slade's course for a bit. I'm a bad student and I got a job, so I didn't finish and like submit my project. And by the time I was like asking if I should submit it later, he was like, "You've made so much stuff by now. Like, do you really want to?" So you can. I mean, Tim would look at it and give feedback, but he was just kind of like laughing a little bit because he knew I had already gotten a job and been making so much stuff, basically.
Is this something that you did before you started your job at Landmark, or was it something that happened? Okay.
I found the field and I'm pretty tech savvy and I like have some web design experience and things like that. So it took me, I spent a good amount of time in Storyline. I did the trial first to see if I hated it or not, because I was like, if I hate it, I don't want any jobs that are development based, right? Because who wants to do something all day that you hate? And so I did that and I was like, this is really fun. I use Storyline all the time, like for things that aren't instructional design. Like I run D&D campaigns and I'll use it for like puzzles in the D&D campaigns and like just send it out to people. So I really like making stuff in Storyline. I found out it's like an easier way to program things without having to program it, I feel like sometimes. So I learned it in about a month, I would say, but only because I had experience in other software. I don't think you could necessarily go from like not knowing any kind of software to learning Storyline in a month.
Wow. Okay. Now I'm stuck on the fact that you're building D&D campaigns with Storyline. I know Kim took the words right out of my mouth. You need to talk to Jonathan Rock, because he is a dungeon master.
Oh,
and
is he?
Also a hardcore Storyline expert. So we are going to need to discuss this because this is important. All right. Hopefully my brain can like get past this one, because that's a good one. Yeah. So well, actually, let me just ask you this, because I'm really curious. What do you build in D&D with Storyline?
So like, let's say you have one time I did a dream sequence. Like I had a player who was absent for a session and they were like, the story for the rest of the party was they were like catatonic. And I did like a dream sequence with like puzzles in it. And then there was an outcome for it. And like, it determined like, they learned some information from it about their backstory that like they would have learned if they'd been in the session. But then there was an outcome where they got like either a buff or a negative, like on a wild magic table. It was basically like it did a wild magic thing at the end based on the choices they made. They had like more positive or negative chances. And then there was a randomization element in it. And they wound up like when they did like come out of it, they went like invisible first and couldn't speak and had to like resolve that in the next session. Like just, I think like it's fun for that when somebody can't be there, or like, if there's a puzzle for the group, instead of handing them like a paper or something, like I can pull up the computer and have like the interaction and they can go through like the puzzle that way, or like choose, if you're in like a dungeon map, like choose different rooms and like you get different outcomes from it. So branching scenarios and stuff. I mean, you could do them I used to do them on like index cards. So like you could do things like that much simpler, but Storyline just makes it a lot prettier. And adds a little bit of like zhuzh to it, which can be fun if you have the time.
Okay, Allison, we're gonna have to geek out on this stuff. Simply because I play D&D pretty regularly. My 9-year-old son is hardcore into D&D and just started LARPing. So that is like my world right now at home. So yeah, I'll get I'll get a hold of J-Rock. Just to move on, I need to talk about TPLD and what you do over there. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think I'm just so curious about your organization.
Sure. So I started as a community manager. Ricky Fisher brought me on board back when he was the VP. And I started as a community manager right after I got this job because I was just like, they were asking for help with the LinkedIn group and like if anybody could help out. And I was like, well, I just got this job. I don't really know very much, but if you want some help, I'm happy to like help out with things. And so I started posting regularly in the community on March, doing the daily post. We used to have daily posts. Now we have about 5 days a week. It kind of varies. And doing the community management for them. Then over the summer, I did like a lot of feedback kind of sessions with teachers who were looking for jobs, helping them. Like I would make looms or like meet with them, helping them or give them feedback on the LinkedIn group, helping them make like pieces or case studies or find volunteer work. And I'm been the vice president since about April or May, since Ricky stepped down from that. And we worked on this large project to get about 9 courses together. It'll be 9 or 10 in the end, for teachers, kind of as this is not instructor led. So there's not instructor led or coaching. So it doesn't replace that, but it would hopefully like give an experience like you might have in a boot camp, but for free, essentially.
Mhm.
Like that, the experience of like everything curated for you, like collected in one place. Because the biggest request we get is like, where do I start? And we can be like, well, you can do this LinkedIn path. You can look at this website. You can look at that. But it's just like so many things out. So it's like curating resources, but also developing things and developing it around a story that makes sense. It is taking a long time, but that's because it's a volunteer thing. So we can only give it so many hours a week. And also it's complicated, right? Like, so it's going to be a big endeavor. But we're really excited about that. And we also do events like tonight. I have a TPLD Presents event with Laurel Schulert, who's a L&D hiring manager. She works at SAP Concur and has been nice enough to come speak with us. And we're going to try to do at least monthly events this year, if not more, and try to kind of make sure people have those opportunities to touch base. We used to have a mentoring program, but we honestly outgrew it because we did not have enough mentors to meet the need, even close, like not to meet even like 5-10% of the need. So we're trying to revamp that with this course and have them go through the course first and then be able to sign up for mentoring, hopefully, which are the number of mentors we have like who volunteer would be closer to people who've like been through this. Okay, now it's not just people like they're not sure if they want to do instructional design or they're not sure what it is. Like they have something specific to go through. That's the goal. Like that's the big dream eventually.
Yeah, totally. That is very, very cool. I know for myself with the mentoring side of things, I tried to set up something through TLDC, but it ended up just me and a spreadsheet and trying and literally just like manually assigning people to each other. And it was actually very resource intensive. And, just because I was just emailing folks and trying to arrange meeting times and stuff. And it's really, really hard. I still haven't really found like a successful implementation of mentorship anywhere. I think there might be something out there that someone told me is actually working, but I haven't experienced it myself. So, yeah. So let's see. Let me ask you a couple more questions. How about an instructional design project that you've worked on that you feel especially proud of?
I'm the kind of person who like what I feel proud of is not like looking at it and like looking at how like technically complex it is or like pretty it is even. So I think the things I'm most proud of are the things that come at that like moment of need. So like over the summer we had a huge software project for our EMR that basically like we were running out of ramp as like we got towards onboarding more people as we were growing. And we didn't have enough trainers to continue the program as it was. So things had to go to e-learning, and software training makes sense to be partially or e-learning. So kind of planning and developing that and executing that with a few other designers and kind of leading the charge on that was something I was really proud of in my current org. And my boss was really happy I was able to do as quickly as I was. Like, I was able to come in like way like ahead of schedule and like under resources, like at a time where I knew like if we didn't get it done on time, we would go off the cliff, right? Like, and that happens in education too. I've definitely had experiences like that as a teacher. So those are the moments that I'm most proud of, like the times where it's like, okay, this would have been really bad if I hadn't done that, like if I hadn't figured this out.
Interesting. Do you like working like in health and medical? Is that something that you were looking for, or you just ended up landing there?
I was looking for it to a degree. Like, I like complex topics that are, my goal was to find like a topic that was really complex and kind of fiddly, had regulations and things like that. Like, I thought that would be more interesting. Because I've always, like, one of the things that I thought about doing when I was much younger was like going to law school, and the kind of lawyer I wanted to be wasn't a trial lawyer. It was like the people who read contracts. So like I wanted to be like I like the like fine print. I'm like the only person usually who reads like all the fine print, and like I knew all the school board policies, like, and I could like recite them, that kind of like nonsense, which is not like useful in most cases, but it's just how my brain works. So healthcare was a field that attracted me for that reason. And also because it's a helping profession. And the more companies I interviewed with that were healthcare based, the more I liked them and liked their mindset, liked their teams. So I'm kind of agnostic in what I create, but I love the team atmosphere that I have here. And I think that part of that does come from being in healthcare. Not that other teams can't be great, but like I get to work with a lot of people who were emergency room nurses and like rose up to be like, you know, nurse educators and have like all these different lived experiences that are really interesting to me. And that I think is a benefit of my job.
Oh, I love that perspective. That's really, really interesting. All right, Allison. Last question. If you weren't an instructional designer or an L&D professional, what do you think you would be?
I think if I were to look at something new that I haven't done before, it would be like program management, project management, that direction, to like look at like the big picture of different initiatives and programs. I think that's where I would go. I don't think I would still be a teacher because I was starting to get restless. So I think like I wouldn't go back to teaching. But looking at like wide scale programs in some other like capacity seems possible.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell. I think one of the reasons why I find you so interesting is that you actually seem like you would be a good conference producer, like building out a live event. I don't know, I just get that feeling. But yeah, so Allison, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you talking with me today, doing this member showcase. I love that we're getting to add another story to the community of TLDC. And I know Allison will probably be talking again at some point. I know that I'd like to work more with Sarah and TPLD and just building out some things. Your TPLD Presents thing tonight, what is that? Can you give us more detail? Like, how do people find more on that?
I can post it if you give me just a minute. I can
Yeah,
find
yeah,
it over.
totally. Because I did not, I knew you guys did like, webinars and stuff, but I just have never seen a schedule. And we're getting messed.
Yeah, we have been kind of a little off like having a regular schedule for a while.
I know the feeling.
Is that, yeah, that should be it. Wait, is that the wrong one? Hold on. No, that was your link. I'm sorry. I pulled the wrong one. This one. That's the link for the event that already happened. Y'all would have to time travel back. There we go. But there is an event tonight. It is at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then like do the time math, 4:30 on the West Coast over there. With Laurel Schulert, who is amazing. She wrote a great series on LinkedIn about why people should hire teachers for L&D roles. She was a teacher. She was an instructional designer. She's an L&D director now. And she just has a wealth of experience and a really like thoughtful spirit, I think, too. Like, she's really a helper, like many of my favorite people in L&D are. And so I'm looking forward to that event tonight. And we do plan to try to do something every month for the rest of the year for the most part. I think there might be some exceptions like December when we come around to holiday time, but we're going to try to get stuff out there for folks. And I'm so excited. Thank you, by the way, for everybody who joined us. I didn't get to say that because we kind of launched in, but it's so nice to see some folks here.
Yeah.
And especially Heidi, who helped me a lot actually when I was starting. She was one of the first people I reached out to and just like asked random questions to on LinkedIn. And she got back to me and was very nice.
Just real quick on that, because it seems like you know a lot of folks. When you were just starting out, I mean, how did you go about doing that? Did you just find like whoever was, who you saw that was most active and you just started messaging them?
It was more based not on who was most active, but whose posts or like ideas resonated with me, or like if I saw something they did on like YouTube or something like, and I had a question about it. Like, I think one of the mistakes people make is they'll write people and just be like, how do I become an instructional designer? And it's like, I don't know. Like, what do you do now? Like, who are you? Because I really don't know, because everybody's different, right? But like if somebody messages something that's, I think, more like specific about something I've written, then I can really help them and like give them insight or like ideas. And that was like where I got like a lot of good insight. I also went to events. I joined TLDC. Like I went to your event last January and I joined and like watched a lot of stuff in the archives and was on the Slack. I just tried to kind of immerse myself in communities of people who were like-minded. I have a passion in things like accessibility too. So I have a lot of, like, I talk with a lot of people in accessibility or DEI. I'm neurodivergent. So I talk with a lot of people who talk about neurodivergence, and just like building relationships has been something that's always been valuable to me. And I think that's probably important in instructional design too, like building relationships with other people in your organization. So I just tried to build authentic relationships, like not for an outcome. Like I wasn't like, hey, give me a job at your company. I mean, sometimes I was, if I wanted a job at their company and it was open and they were a recruiter. But like, for the most part, it was just like, hey, you said this interesting thing. Where can I learn more about this? Or like, it was all about like learning and getting feedback.
So much good advice. Wow. Alison, thank you. I am going to clip a whole bunch of stuff from this one and post it out there, because I think it's been really, really, really great stuff. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks everybody for joining. I mean, it was nice to see everyone. Haven't done a TLD cast in a while, and I'm going to try to get back on these weekly. Just a reminder, in a few weeks, in February, we're going to be doing a data measurement and analytics event. We're just finishing booking that one up now, so that's coming up. I'll have that information out on the website soon. And then in March, we're going to be doing our Women of L&D event. And I know, Alison, you'd expressed interest in helping in that one. So, and that one is already getting a lot of buzz around it. I've been getting lots of messages, so we'll get that one out there for everyone to sign up for soon. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close it out. Thanks again, everybody. Thanks, Alison. And I'll try to pop in this afternoon for that TPLD Presents. I'd love to hear that one.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Thanks.
All right. Bye, everyone.